Hello, I'm Hope Katz-Gibbs, creator of the Incandescent Radio Network, here with my friend and colleague, Tony Farmer, host of the Black Lives Matter radio show. We are thrilled you are here with us today, so let's get started. Hello and welcome to the Black Lives Matter radio show. I'm Hope Katz-Gibbs, founder of the Incandescent Radio Network, here with the amazing Siddeeq Shabazz, a former retired NFL athlete who is currently the Community Relations Manager at Mountain View Regional Medical Center here in Las Cruces, New Mexico, where he and I are. He is getting his PhD in marketing and scheduled to graduate next month, which is very cool. And now I'd like to introduce the host of the show, Tony Farmer, who is based in DC, and he and Siddeeq are going to have a wonderful conversation about this very important topic. So I'm going to throw it over to you, Tony.
Thank you very much, Hope, and thank you, Siddeeq, for joining us this evening. Just wanted to have an informal conversation with you to talk about your experience and your experiences as we kind of weave through not only this pandemic, but some of the social unrest that has sparked, hit the country by storm. So particularly over the last 8 months. So as Hope mentioned, you have a vast experience. You've been a professional athlete. You are now sitting for your PhD. Give us a little background as to how you found your direction in life.
As you were saying, as you were introducing me that way, I wish I had a great story like the football thing. It was always a passion of mine. I don't know that I ever thought I would play in the NFL. And I think that's part of what helped me to get there was just always wanting to be better. I was never the greatest as a youngster growing up, so I was always working hard. So that trajectory, I think by the time I knew that NFL scouts were looking at me, this wasn't until my junior year in college. That was the first time it really became something that I would even think about in my life. My background, there was nobody in my family who really excelled in sports. My stepfather, he didn't care about sports. Most of us didn't really play sports growing up. I had to really fight for the ability to play my senior year in high school. I only played my freshman year, and then he took us out. He took me out of football for 2 years. So that trajectory, it was kind of weird how that happened. And then I was just in it, you know what I mean? So there wasn't really a whole lot of planning and strategizing in my life. Just became this NFL experience, and then rolled into NFL Europe experience and Canadian Football League. And along that journey is really where I think some direction started coming into my life when I became a lifestyle coach near the end. Was it the end? I guess it was near the middle of my professional football career. Started being mentored by a lifestyle coach and started going down that path. He just had it was actually one of my older stepbrothers who I didn't really have a big relationship with. There were a few years between us where we were never really interacting in school, and he went off and was doing his own thing, and we connected when I was in Atlanta with the Falcons, and just really started helping me think about what my life was and where I came from and how that impacted my future. And really I had a whole lot of negativity, I think, about my background, my family, my life situation that I think it weighed on me very heavily. And he really helped me get out of that and have a more positive look back at my family life and some of the ways that it put me in the position to be successful in football, at least. But he was also coaching me through a tough relationships place. 2 weeks after I was drafted by the Raiders, I had my first child, and that was where he kind of jumped into my life at that point. Me and my child's mother had a real rocky start, and he was mentoring me through that and really gave me some hope and some tools and some resources that would carry on to me wanting to be a lifestyle coach. And then football was another weird transition. I mean, not football, my PhD. I was transitioning out of football, and honestly, I was struggling. Me and my 3 older children's mother's relationship didn't work out, and I was struggling with I wasn't sure if the feelings of depression, the overwhelming feelings of depression, were from CTE or if it was my lifestyle. And the NFL actually, I guess the thing that really pushed me into pursuing my PhD, one of my buddies, I got to sit in and watch him get his PhD, and he just kind of dropped that seed on me afterwards. And it didn't really hit me till months later when I went to the Cleveland Clinic to get my head checked out. And I also got to speak to a psychologist, and she was like, I honestly can't tell you if it's something wrong with your brain or like your life circumstances are pretty rough right now, where it would make sense that you might be just having some depression from those circumstances. And she recommended that having a PhD, having that work and that structure in my life with all the things that were outside of my hands up until then, that would probably give some good structure, give some good foundation to really launch me into that next part of my life, which I think I'm really in the middle of now. And it really feels like a totally different place in my life. The first year that I was pursuing my PhD, I also came to Christ. And just the way that trajectory kind of came around, it was all, the timing was just perfect for this new phase, new step in my life.
So as a former athlete, as an academic, and as a man of faith, give us an idea of how the Black Lives Matter movement has impacted you personally.
Okay, that's a good question. I actually had a question for you guys, if you don't mind me jumping in with one.
Sure.
So as a Christian, the Black Lives Matter name, I think words have been one of the most troubling things as I engage in this conversation, especially that tagline, Black Lives Matter. It comes with so much resistance and so much, it seems like such a polarized name that I was really surprised at you guys' choice. I know there was a lot of thought into it, but as I was thinking about it, like I've honestly steered away from saying Black Lives Matter because I've seen how quickly it shuts down conversations with, I think, the people who are in my community who I've felt the most impacted with this racism and social unrest by. So my Christian community, I think that Black Lives Matter is one of those words that has created an obstacle for me. That hasn't, but I think the idea, I see the reactions to it, and that's really been hard for me to overcome and really embrace. Not like, for me, Black Lives Matter, but just, I thought it was interesting. So I wanted to hear you guys talk about that real quick, and then I'll share with you kind of what happened for me.
Yeah, so Hope and I had a conversation a couple of months back, and we really wanted to do something that carried on the conversation. So many times we have situations where, to your point, people walk away from the conversation. And often when they walk away from the conversation, the assumption is, when I walk away, or because I walk away, everything's good. We had it, it was difficult, we made it through. But this particular conversation, given that there are so many men and women who are impacted continually about, around losing their lives due to police actions, right? That it's so important to continue the conversation, no matter how painful or controversial or polarizing it is. To your point, our goal is to keep that window open, not to position people in a way that they will be uncomfortable, but to position people in a way that signifies we're all human. There is an element that connects us, which is safety and security and wanting to be part of a community. And then there are things that still we need to talk about in order to level the playing field so that we all feel safe in the same way. So Black Lives Matter is akin to making sure that we keep those lines of communications open to ensure that this thread, this consciousness continues. I don't know in my lifetime if there will ever be complete equity between the races, but this is our small effort to ensure that those conversations continue to take place. Hope, did I miss anything? Is there anything you would like to add?
No, I think you've got it. The reason that I wanted to do this show is because I think they've started an incredible movement that has awakened things that have laid dormant for all of us. And it's an opportunity, I think, to have these conversations, like Tony said, and to go deeper with them. So, it doesn't strike me that the words should be polarizing unless people aren't comfortable with the conversation. And we knew that when we did this, that there would be discomfort, and we were cool with that. And you are our third interview, and we've gotten to interview Dr. Reggie Smith, who's the head of the U.S. Distance Learning Association, and Dre Gardner, who's a big yogi in Las Vegas and a trendsetter and a really powerful human being. His parents were Black Panthers, and now you. We're really thrilled that you've come on and to talk to us. And we're going to follow up with a bunch of women that we're going to talk to, and other men. And we're doing this every Sunday night. And we're just letting the conversation unfold. So to us, to answer your question more succinctly, it doesn't feel like it should be polarizing. So we're trying to take that sting out of it by just having conversations and letting people share their thoughts.
Awesome. Thank you, guys. You had a question for me, Tony. Remember?
My question was, as a former athlete, as an academic, and as a man of faith, how has the Black Lives Matter movement impacted your life?
Okay, thank you. And I think I'd like to start by speaking into what Hope mentioned about just this powerful movement that has started, and it's rippled across the world in response to people being more aware, I think, more aware globally of like just the ugliness of hatred that has been left to simmer under the surface forever, I think, in the US. And I think I have this big passionate drive now to join this conversation because I wasn't looking at it for the first 39 and a half years of my life. I think my sentiment changed probably 7 or 8 years ago about the fact that the US is a great place and anybody can make the most of their life. But for me, I was always of the mindset that, hey, if you work hard, everyone has the same opportunity, the same chance to make it in the US. And I don't know what it was, but I know that about 8 years ago, that sentiment started to change. I started seeing things differently and knew that there were, not me, I wasn't impacted as much by racism as some people, brown and Black people are. And that's kind of been there in the background that, yes, I feel like there is some justice to be had in the world, but I wasn't engaged in it, and it didn't matter to me until 2 weeks after George Floyd's death. So when George Floyd died, I was busy with my work role, with my family role, with my church role, and with my PhD. And my plate was full, and it was all about me and mine and building my niche in this world, that my safe space, my comfort. So my wife was the first person to bring what happened to George Floyd into my purview. I don't watch very much on TV, just don't have time. So I've been very secluded from news, media, social media. I was on a 3-year hiatus from social media when all this happened. So I don't know what people are talking about in popular culture. And she tells me, like, she looks kind of upset, and I'm working on my PhD, working on my writing, and she looks upset. And then when we talk about it, she tells me that she's in an argument on Facebook with a member of our congregation who had posted something about this man's death. And I talked to her about it. I don't look into it very deeply, but I'm like, my suggestion was Facebook wasn't the platform to have this conversation. And like most of the people who are on there sharing these ideas, they're not looking to be educated. They're looking for people who want to want to hear what they're saying. So we have that conversation, and I go back to my work. It's like, I'm just gonna go into my work. So I get back into my work, purposely not wanting to get involved in it, get engaged in it. And my wife is Caucasian. Then a Caucasian buddy from my church that's off at law school reaches out to me. I think he calls me or he sends me a text saying, basically, he's sorry that this is the world we live in, and when he gets his law degree, hopefully he'll be able to impact some serious change. And now I start feeling guilty, like I'm the only one in this group, this triad of folks who should be thinking about it, and I have no idea what's even going on. And I started feeling guilty and like feeling if something was wrong with me, that I'm not engaged in this conversation. So then I went and I watched the first minute of the video. And this was me trying to get rid of some of the guilt and step into the conversation and do my duty as a Sicilian Black American, like let me engage in this conversation. And a minute in, I feel all the things that I feel anytime I see. I think what we've seen always kind of happens in the US, and like there's always this, it's more personal for me than it is for my wife, for my buddies. Everywhere I'm at, I'm typically the only Black person. Where I grew up here in southern New Mexico, I'm the only Black person. So I'm the only person I know of who's feeling those things at the level I'm feeling. And I think subconsciously or consciously, I decided not to be the one person feeling the sting of racism while everybody else is fine, and be the target of like, oh, this guy has a problem just because he's Black, and whatever it may be. And that minute kind of touched on those feelings, but it also felt like something different, and something just started to grow in me, this upset, honestly. So then like a couple days later, I'm at work with my executive team talking about just the state of affairs in the US. And I'm like, oh, they're going to talk about this. They mentioned the financial downturn. They mentioned the COVID. And I'm like, my ears perk up because like we're talking about the world and this is a big thing going on. And it just kind of went without being said. And that's when it really kind of settled in on me that everywhere, every space I'm in, this isn't a topic that needs to be discussed. I went back to my office and I sat there and I was just like wondering, like, what, like still in that guilt and shame, I think, like, who am I that I am just amongst people who don't seem concerned about this? Like, I feel like it's a bigger deal than for us to not be talking about in our workspace, in our, wherever we're at. And then my wife sends me this, we're having a 9-minute silence for George Floyd. And I'm a busy guy, so I'm like, oh, I can easily do that. I'll just sit here for 9 minutes in my office with my door locked. Nobody's going to bother me. I have all these things I need to plan out, so I'll just have to keep my mouth shut. So I just start trying to do something. And in that first minute, after the first minute of silence, that's all I saw of the video. That was all I needed to see of the video. That's all I needed to be silent, to put myself in the mindset of this was a man. And the words that I heard in those 3 minutes, they hit me in my soul. I heard him say, I can't breathe. I heard him say, mama. And I heard him say, I'm done. And a minute into trying to be silent, not caring about George Floyd, his family, the people who stood there and watched this police officer sit on his neck for 9 minutes, and a minute in, I'm on my floor in my office sobbing, gut-wrenching sobs that I've only sobbed for my children, for my family, never for a stranger. And my heart was broke, and I was in my office and I was hiding. I was hiding from my office. I was hiding from my peers. I was hiding from my boss. I was hiding from HR because the same thing. I don't want to be the only Black person who has a problem if I'm to be successful. Like, I'm broken right now over this thing and nobody else is. That doesn't seem like it adds up in that space. So I really started to go deep from that moment on to try and understand what I was feeling and what I could do about what I was feeling. And I sent you guys that essay that took me probably a week or 2 weeks to write, just trying to figure out Siddeeq Shabazz, Southern New Mexico, father is an African-American who was practicing Islam, left when I was 3. Now I have this Nigerian stepfather, grew up in Chaparral, New Mexico, the only Black family in my community, all of this history of not racial pain, like racial, to me, racial, yeah, like every friend that I've ever had probably called me a nigger at some point, like not, it didn't hurt me. Like I've come to a point where I kind of expected people in my life to call me a nigger. And as I got older, I think after college, it was a funny thing. When I was in high school, it was a thing that I got, or in middle school, I got to beat people up and probably not get in trouble with the school or with my parents if I told them that that's why I was fighting. But it was never anything that was an oppressive thing for me. It was more an inconvenience in my life. But now what I think I came to as I wrote that essay and took 2 weeks to really just feel who I was in this conversation. I was nobody in this conversation. I had aligned myself with not having this conversation, not caring about this conversation, telling people that you can do, be, have anything that you want in America if you're willing to work hard, and aligning, I feel now, with everybody else who's not concerned, and which is, to me, the reason. I think the silence is the most deadly thing in this conversation. We're calling it a conversation. I'm calling it a conversation. And there's so many people who are silent right now, who don't talk about it, don't want to think about it. And to me, that is the most insidious part of racism in America. Since I wrote that essay, I think I started going into a deep dive, trying to educate myself on what is this? Like, why is it still here? Why did George Floyd happen? How can I be somebody different to not let that happen? But there's this piece of it as well with my church, not my congregation. Part of it's my congregation, but the church, like Christians, white Christians especially, seem to be one of the most hostile groups to the conversation. When I mentioned Black Lives Matter, that to me, to that group, is going to be something that they'll shut down that conversation. I've learned a whole lot more about critical race theory than I never heard of that before in my life until this conversation, from white evangelical Christians. Marxism, heard about it before, but never had somebody really try and teach me why that's important for me as a Christian. And I started out trying to have conversations with the people who were sharing those ideas first, because I had a relationship with a couple of them. And I knew that there was something very disconnected between what I'm feeling with George Floyd and what they were feeling with George Floyd. And that really, I think, added to my frustration, to say the least. It came to a boiling point where I was at a nice dinner with some great people who are Christians. And we talk about my football history, just bring up the subject about not wanting to watch football because people are bringing their protest or bringing their politics into this sport. And they just casually mentioned wanting to just watch football, a husband and a wife, a couple, like, we just want to see a good football game. So for me, there's two different levels to that. One, as an athlete, like feeling like part of that message is like, your body belongs to us for entertainment when you choose to play that sport. So you don't kneel while we're trying to watch a football game with your body being one of the tools in us getting that entertainment. Don't use your body to say anything political, no matter how bad things are outside of the world. If you feel something about it, you hold that in until we're entertained, and maybe go talk to somebody who cares. We don't care. We just want entertainment when football comes on. There's that level of it. But then there's also maybe that's the only level. I think as a player, that's part of it, but also as a Black man, like, I think that has always been the message to us is you should be lucky. You should be lucky that you're not hanging from a tree right now. You should be lucky that you have enough food. You should be lucky that I hear you're in America where we have freedoms for you. You can say what you want. You can do what you want. And you should be lucky enough to that you have a platform that we've created for you to make millions of dollars to entertain us. So just shut up and entertain us. And I didn't say anything. I was already at this point in this conversation where I said I was going to speak up into every situation where people are saying things that feel like they promote this hatred, promote this racist undercurrent to American culture, US culture. But I didn't say anything. I was thinking about saying something. Then I got in my car. It had been 2 weeks. I had to focus for 2 weeks. My conversations with those Christians had gotten to a point where we couldn't talk anymore. So 2 weeks I was focusing on my PhD. I hadn't thought about this subject for a while. And I thought in the back of my mind, there was this, everyone around me seems to already kind of, the emotion of George Floyd has gone away. And I was scared that my passion, this newfound desire to speak and act and move to change what's happening in America might dwindle. But that little comment, like I get in my car, me and my wife, and I'm driving us home, and a flood of emotion takes over. It's anger. I think anger is the biggest part of it. It's like these people don't know what they're saying. They don't know how hurtful that is, not to me, but to the George Floyds, to the list of names. George Floyd is what got me into this. So I keep going back to that. But there have been so many after George Floyd that it's not funny. It's tragic. Like, we're talking about police violence and it's still happening. Like, you would think everyone's on their P's and Q's right now. Like, everyone's at a heightened level of, hey, let's prove that we're not, this isn't true. Let's make sure we're doing our job the cleanest way that we can. And that's not what we're seeing. We're seeing people continue to die. The list continues to be added to. And this I wouldn't say rage, but this passionate anger and desire to move away from conversations like that into conversations like this. Like, I was in tears. People I don't even know saying something silly about a silly game put me in this state of just such a visceral pain for my country and the trajectory that it's been in, and the feeling that it's never going to change, with comments with perspectives like that are just uninformed. I think if they knew, part of what frustrated me is they knew I played football. They know I'm a Christian, but they don't know how I feel about race relations. But it seemed like they could assume because I'm a Christian that I would agree with that, or they didn't care. They didn't care what I felt. And those opinions have gotten really under my skin. And I've been trying to figure out, how do I have these conversations? My wife is a peacemaker, and she has helped balance me out a lot. I'm a confrontational, I'd say I'm a confronter, not confrontational. I try not to be confrontational, but I confront things. And I've been trying my best to do it in a way that, like, I want to see positive change. So I don't want to tell people they're racist, or I don't even think that they are racist, but I think that they're saying things and they're blind to their cooperation with systems that continue to lead to George Floyd and all the other names that we could name. And that's where I'm at. So that night I wrote a long Facebook post. I don't know if I shared it with you. Did I share it with you, Hope? No? I wrote a post on Facebook. I slept on it because I didn't want to just be confrontational. I let my wife read it before I posted it. Basically putting out all of the things that I feel are insensitive in this current time, I talked about how the American flag feels a lot like the Confederate flag has felt to me all my life. Like I've seen a lot more of them pop up. And my my stepfather served in the Army. My older brother served in the Marines. My younger brother currently serves in the Air Force. My family protects this country like every other patriotic citizen. And at the beginning of this year, I was looking at flags. I know it costs, I think, $29.98 at Home Depot for one of those big flags that I could hang on my thing, because I was looking at buying one. I didn't have a rod, or I probably would have one out there. I want to be a patriotic American citizen. But right now, flying a flag, that's been part of the thoughts in my head. It's like, how can I get back in a place where this flag feels like it's mine, and it's not just people who are promoting these divisive conversations. I think there's divisiveness that can be said on both sides, honestly, but this racial either ignorance or hostility, like there's people who do that who own the flag right now. If you see somebody waving a flag, you know who they're voting for, I think, and you know who, how they feel about race relations in the U.S. You might know their faith beliefs, and that scares me. That concerns me, and that's something that bothers me because I am a Christian. I am patriotic. I think I'm not crazy patriotic. I've never felt like the country has really been for me, so I don't have the same passion for America that I know some people do. And I don't know that I need to, but I do love our country. I do want to see our country do well, and I want to see us do better. I don't think we'll be a great country until race relations are better. And it's become like, I feel like I can't wait to finish my PhD to get to work on this. This feels like it's something that I feel God has moved me. Like, I don't know. My emotional responses weren't my own to this. I feel like
so you of course have a super unique background based on your lineage and your heritage and how it kind of forms this multiplicity aspects of people, right? You and I once upon a time talked about how you had Sicilian, right? And you mentioned your stepfather who was Nigerian, so that gives you another aspect of culture. And you've of course traveled all over the world. And given what you've told us so far, if you were to give a message, right? If you were to give a 2 or 3 point message to your children, especially the younger ones who are coming up, or more importantly, a younger Siddeeq, what would that message sound like?
That's a tough question. I have a 16-year-old son who's he's one of my 3 older children who we have somewhat of a strained relationship. But through this, he's been reaching out occasionally. He doesn't reach out very often, but when he has reached out, I could tell he is struggling with his identity in this. I think he's predominantly around Hispanic people on his mom's side of the family. And I know that he's struggling in a way that I struggle. So I'm half Sicilian, half Black. He's half Hispanic, a quarter Sicilian, a quarter Black. And has a strained relationship with his father, who I think is the one person who could really impact his understanding of this, even though I'm still trying to figure it out. And I think the message to him and the message to a younger me. So I think he's embraced his, I guess what you would call Black culture a lot more than I did. I feel like I grew up looking at what success looked like in America and trying to make my verbiage, make myself appealing to this predominantly white culture, and strategically moved myself away from any part of my culture where I would even probably wouldn't have even claimed that I was Black until about 8 years ago. And now that I think about it, part of that started with a conversation with a friend challenging me on, I'm half Black and I'm half Sicilian. And what if you're all of that? And I still don't know what that means. But when my son reached out to me, that was my message to him. And it came from you, honestly. You gave me some great inspiration when we had that conversation. You just talked about the, just that warrior spirit on all sides of my lineage. And that's not something that's spoken, that was never spoken into me about the Black part of me. The Black part, like I've always heard that fire on the Sicilian side. My mom is a fiery Sicilian lady with all this passion. And I feel like I can relate to that. I've been passionate all my life and have moved from passion. But when we think about Black America, I fear that my own view of that is what America produces, what it promotes. It's this criminal element to be feared. It's this, I didn't grow up around Black people. The only Black people I knew were on TV and my family, you know? So what do you see on TV? It's this thing to be scared of. It's this hypersexualized culture. It's this fatherless culture. And it's something to move away from. You were the first person probably in my life. Like I had been thinking about like, what is Black pride? Like so I grew up without my biological father and didn't have that tight relationship with my stepfather. And my son, I've always been concerned for my son, like being forced into this false fatherless childhood. Like I'm here for him, but he doesn't get the benefit of that like my two younger children do. So there's always been this piece of me in everything that I do that wants to give my son what's been taken away from him, that I know was taken away from me, that understanding of who you are as a man, from the man that you come from, but also as a Christian from my new birth, you know what I mean? My new father. And so as I think about this, like I was able to pass that on to him, like all of who you are. My son's name is Siddeeq as well. His name is Siddeeq. His middle name is Jassim, which means strength and courage. I wanted him to be a lot more courageous than I've been. I've never spoken up about racism in my life. I've joked about it, but I've never really went to battle for it. Right now, all day today and yesterday, I was on Facebook talking about it, like speaking out, like trying to point people. But I listened to this song, Toby Keith. I like country music. I'm a New Mexican. I'm listening to country music. I'm more culturally New Mexican than anything else. And so I'm listening to that with my 3-year-old in the back shopping, and I hear, hang them in the middle, get all the rope in Texas and hang them on an oak tree, and the long arm of the law needs to bury more bodies. And it caught me, like I was like, did I really just hear that? A popular song on one of the few radio stations we have out here. And I was like, did he just say that? Did he really say that? So I looked up the lyrics, and that's exactly what he said. And I posted it on Facebook. I was like, I love country music. I think my wife became my wife because we danced to some country music. But those two lines from the song, and I said, yikes, and I posted it. And one of my white buddies hopped on there very quickly saying, I think you're reading too much into it. And another friend who's been having these dialogues with me jumped in and said, I also think you're reading into it. A third person jumped in, so it just gave me the opportunity to say why I think this other side, but turned into a 2-day affair that I would have never done before. Like I've stayed away from it. And that courage piece, my son, he's a lot more courageous than I was as a youngster. He's also a little bit, I guess I was a knucklehead too at his age, but I don't know. I just fear for.
We all have that, a little bit of that as young men,
right?
You know, teenagers.
But I fear for him. I fear for him being raised like he's fatherless, and for all the other fatherless Black and brown kids out there who I see it differently now, especially when I've been doing a deep dive, looking at the judicial system, looking at just all the things that, like, even like I haven't looked too much into this. Once I'm done with my dissertation, I will. Like the CIA bringing narcotics into the Black communities to start a war on drugs that wasn't there, like that blows my mind. But you see it being talked about as if, yes, it did happen, but you also see people jumping today and saying it has no impact on our communities. Like it has no impact on the way the laws are being handled right now and why so many Black people are incarcerated when they may have brought the drugs into the community. They said it was a conspiracy theory. I was reading a book or listening to a book, The New Jim Crow. She pointed that out for the first time, but then I've heard it in several other instances now that I've been engaged in this conversation. And it's so crazy how many things we can be blind to if we want to, and I don't want to anymore. And my message to myself would be to be more courageous and not align myself. Like I have a totally different idea of what success is. Football was great for me. It really put me in a position to I think, do more things in my life than I would have if I hadn't played football. But I think I also see that I'm in spaces where I can hopefully speak this message because I was able to set myself apart in that way and bump elbows with people who wouldn't bump elbows with a guy like me. But I don't think people see that in my church, in my organization. I don't think they know that the only reason I'm there, or not the only, but a huge reason I'm there, is because one, I had to set myself apart exceptionally as an athlete first. Also had to set myself apart exceptionally. I'm not, you called me an academic and I get kind of nervous. I wouldn't consider myself an academic, but I had to work hard to put myself in a position to have some knowledge, the credentials to be at this table and be the only one sitting here. Would I have been there if a couple of people in that boardroom when I was presenting my PhD, would I have been looked at the same way if I didn't have this NFL career behind me? Who would I be if I wasn't an NFL player? If I didn't set myself apart exceptionally? And then to hear people talk about athletes who, a lot of them, that was their only escape. But then there's guys who had to stop playing football because they were getting double PhDs at MIT, breaking codes, or I don't know what the guy, I saw something about this guy. I think it was a lineman, just brilliant mind. So you have everyone in there. But then even like at the start of this conversation, I'm listening to, I've really put myself in this Christian bubble, listening to a Christian radio station and hearing a Southern white pastor speaking not about race, speaking about football players making a lot of money and complaining and just everything that he's saying. The only thing you can picture is the same people that you pick. It's black. It's black people you're talking about. And it's black people you're telling, shut up. You make too much money anyways. Like you're dumb. And like, is that how we really want to respect this? Except like I love greatness. I love great music. Like when I see somebody just be able to perform, and there's some athletes out there. Michael Vick was somebody that I got to play with Mike Vick and just watch him like, and then watch him. He did some special. He was recording for it. He was throwing with his left hand and his right. The guy was ambidextrous. He could throw the ball equally as well from either side, but the left hand was the one that he used more regularly. This guy was a phenomenon. You know what I mean? Just an exceptional, I see our culture, not anything. I don't want to get absolute with this, but I see so many instances of us downplaying anything that black success is always seems to come with a, yeah, but who cares? You know what I mean? Like, after talking to you, honestly, like I'm thinking, like, I think you said something. Yeah, you said for us to survive, as a black man, to survive when everything in this country is against us. Then I watched that documentary, The 13th, and I've told other people to watch it, and what they get from it is Marxism and critical race theory. And for me, I see this black man at the end of the show. They show this black man sitting posed was his back torn up from years, a lifetime of being brutally beaten. And it reminds me of what you said. For us to survive in a country that will easily beat us to death, easily crush our neck to death, for us to survive, just to survive, is an accomplishment. But on top of that, there's so much to be proud about that has been co-opted, it has been twisted in American culture and in the narrative that surrounds everything that has anything to do with race. And we do a poor job at celebrating what it means to be a Black American. And even the things that we do celebrate seem like they're so secondhand, so who cares? Yeah, give them a day, give them a month. But we haven't embraced the ugliness of our country. And I think we can't embrace the beauty of what we stole and brought to America. And we've had here. And I don't think that beauty will shine until we figure out a way to honor, to look back and say, yeah, we made some terrible mistakes, and start trying to repair that brokenness rather than blaming the outcomes, looking at the outcomes and saying, you guys suck and it's something about your Black culture that sucks, and start building. I want to be a part of that. That's my takeaway. That's my stance. Is we've done a poor job of looking at what we've done, how it's impacted Black lives, and how hard we've made it to celebrate Black culture, Black beauty, Black, just the beauty, like not just Black, like as a child, I felt like one day the world would look like me. Like my mom was Black, my dad was, my mom's Sicilian, my dad is Black. And as a child, I was like, one day I'm not going to be too white for the Black kids, too Black for the white kids. They're going to be the odd ones because we're going to be such a melting pot. And now I see, oh no, we are eons away from that. Like there's beauty, I think, in cultures coming together, but there's so much pressure to keep them apart in the US. It's crazy how divided we could be to this day. And I just think back to as a kid, like thinking that there was a time when I would be the majority and I would fit in, you know what I mean? I think that's part of what God put into my life to desire community and to desire to fit in, and never really feeling like there's a space that I'm known, I'm seen, I'm valued at the same level. But for me now, seeing what that looks like for people who are darker than me, like to feel that in this country, like I have a privilege that they don't have. Like I have a privilege that you didn't have, Tony. That the complexion comes with so much,
Well, Siddeeq, listen, you asked Hope and I early on what it was that we wanted to accomplish by having these conversations. And I would say without a lot of prompting at all, you have covered it all, right? You have covered perception, you've covered culture, you've covered what it is to be a patriot and what it feels like when you want to be a patriot, but somehow you feel like your patriotism is marked in some negative way, or that the representation of, how you come forward with your patriotism is just different from the norm, and how that's not always a positive thing. So I wanted to tell you, first of all, thank you. We blew through an hour, and it seems like we were just getting started, right? But I wanted to just encourage you to keep having the conversations. Hope and our desire is to keep having these conversations and to make sure that people know that they're not the only ones who feel the way they do, right? So sometimes the devil in the detail is feeling like you're isolated. Like there can't be more people that feel the way I do. There can't be more people who have the perspective I have. There can't be more people who desire to have this conversation, not just have the conversation, but to build a foundation upon which future generations can build their lives on and really make significant changes so that we all feel like we're on a level playing field. So thank you again. for being candid and open and raw and honest and really allowing your emotions to be put on display. I don't have any other questions for you. Hope, as I always like to do, I like to throw it over to you to ask the closing questions and then to take us away. So over to you.
Well, thank you, Tony. And you took the words right out of my mouth and said it even much more articulately than I could. This is exactly why we're doing this show and why we're calling it the Black Lives Matter radio show and why Tony is the host. And he's an amazing coach. I think that was what you were suggesting, Siddeeq, that Tony coached you a little bit in the beginning of this when you were struggling and you and I had first talked. So I'm so thrilled that anything that we've done has made some kind of impact, and we know that you continue to make an impact, and we give you voice and we give everyone else voice who wants to have this conversation with us. So please come back on the show. We'll check back in with you pretty regularly so that as this evolves, because it's not going to end, we'll see what happens on Tuesday, November 3rd during the presidential election, because that will definitely be a game changer either way. So Thank you both, gentlemen, for this wonderful conversation this evening on Sunday, November 1st, 2020. We're talking with Siddeeq Shabazz, a former NFL player who is about to get his PhD in marketing and just change the world. And Tony Farmer, to you, our host. Thank you, sir. We'll talk to you soon. So that's all for today's episode of the Black Lives Matter radio show on incandescentradio.com. We have an amazing lineup of future guests, just like you heard on today's show. So be sure to tune in for another episode and tell your friends about us so they can listen too. If you or someone you know should be a guest on our show, send me an email, hopecatsgibbs@gmail.com, and we'll be in touch. Again, this is blacklivesmatterradioshow.com on the Incandescent Radio Network. We look forward to talking to you. Until then, stay safe and be well.